I didn't cry when my parents told me they couldn't help with my medical bill. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood in their kitchen holding the invoice and listened as my mother explained, without looking at me, that they'd already committed to helping my sister with her apartment deposit. My father nodded from across the room and added the words that would change everything. You don't need us like she does, Caleb. You've always been able to figure things out. That moment should have broken me. Instead, it clarified everything. So I made a different decision. I stopped asking. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. I simply withdrew, quietly, permanently. And by the time they noticed what was missing, it was already too late to get it back. My name is Caleb Ward. I was 26 when this happened, and for most of my life, I was the easy child, the dependable one, the one who didn't need much. That's what my parents liked to say whenever someone asked about me. My sister, on the other hand, needed everything. At our family table, conversations always leaned in her direction. Her job stress, her apartment problems, her relationship drama, her plans that never quite worked out. My parents listened to her the way people lean closer when they're afraid of missing something urgent. When I spoke, they nodded politely, eyes already drifting, waiting for me to finish so they could return to what really mattered. Our house looked warm from the outside. Family photos on the mantel, holiday cards still taped to the fridge weeks too long, the smell of coffee brewing every morning. But inside, there was a quiet hierarchy everyone understood without saying it out loud. My sister was the center. I orbited. When I got into college, the excitement lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then my mom said, "That's wonderful, honey," and turned to ask my sister about a work conflict she was navigating. I paid my own tuition through scholarships, loans, and part-time work. I covered my own bills, my own rent, my own everything. My parents helped my sister with her car payments, her security deposits, her credit card debt. When I once asked for help with textbooks, my dad smiled and said, "You're so independent, Caleb. You'll figure it out." I learned not to ask again. The thing about being overlooked your whole life is that you stop expecting anything. You tell yourself it doesn't hurt anymore, even when it does. You learn how to swallow disappointment quietly and keep moving. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. My parents missed my college graduation because my sister had a minor medical procedure scheduled the same weekend. When I got my first job offer, my mom said she was proud, then immediately asked if I could lend my sister money for her move. Every milestone in my life felt like background noise to something louder, something more urgent, something that wasn't me. I worked full-time all through my 20s, long hours, stressful deadlines. I learned how to stretch a paycheck and prioritize which bills could wait a few days. Meanwhile, my sister talked casually about rent payments my parents covered for her, car repairs they paid, grocery money they sent, as if it was just how the world worked. When she joked about my boring, stable life, my parents laughed along, not maliciously, just comfortably, like they didn't see a reason to stop her. By the time I needed help with a medical bill after an emergency room visit, I wasn't surprised they chose my sister's apartment deposit over me. But that didn't make it hurt less. It just made it familiar. A few days later, I was sitting on my couch staring at the invoice, trying to figure out payment plans, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was my father. He didn't ask how I was feeling or if I'd figured out the medical bill. He asked if I could help my sister move furniture that weekend. There was a pause after I said no. Not an angry pause. Just a confused one. He asked if everything was okay. I told him I had plans. The conversation ended quickly. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and stared at my phone. I thought about calling back, about explaining, about making them understand. But then I realized something fundamental had shifted. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing not to be invisible anymore. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. And once that door opened in my mind, I couldn't close it again. Once I made the decision, everything became strangely quiet. Not peaceful exactly. More like the calm that comes before something irreversible. There was no dramatic fallout. My parents didn't suddenly call to apologize. My sister didn't notice anything at all. Life continued the way it always had, with me on the margins and them at the center. And for the first time, I stopped fighting that reality. What my family didn't know was that my life had been moving in a different direction for a long time. I'd been working quietly, building something on the side while I maintained my regular job. Consulting work, late nights, taking on projects between deadlines, learning how to survive rejection without letting it hollow me out. I never talked about it at home because no one asked, and eventually I learned not to volunteer information that would be ignored. A few weeks after the kitchen conversation, my business partner called with news. We'd landed a major client. The kind that changed trajectories. There would be expansion, travel, real money. He asked if I was ready for that level of commitment. I remember sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, staring at nothing. Yes, I said. I'm ready. I didn't tell my family. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because it didn't occur to me to share good news with people who had never made space for it before. I focused on the work. Contracts, meetings, proposals. As the business grew, I expected to feel excited. Instead, I felt grounded. Like I was finally standing on solid ground after years of trying to balance on something that kept shifting beneath me. When my parents texted asking why I'd missed Sunday dinner, I responded that I was busy. When my sister called needing someone to vent to, I let it go to voicemail. When my dad asked if I could help with yard work, I said I had a work trip. None of it was dramatic. It was just quiet withdrawal, one declined invitation at a time. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. Lighter. More solid. I realized something then that I wish I'd understood years earlier. Losing people who never really showed up isn't a loss. It's a release. And as I turned off the light and went to bed, I knew that distance wasn't cruelty. It was survival. The shift didn't happen all at once. But over the following months, the absence became noticeable. I declined Thanksgiving. Said I had to work through Christmas. Didn't show up for my sister's birthday dinner. My parents started asking questions, gently at first, then with growing confusion. My mother left voicemails saying she missed me. My father texted asking if everything was okay. I responded with short, polite messages. I'm fine. Just busy. Work is demanding. They didn't push. Not yet. They were confused, but not concerned. Because in their minds, I'd always been fine. I'd always figured things out. Why would this time be any different? Then my sister made a mistake. A big one. She quit her job without having another lined up, spent money she didn't have, and found herself facing eviction within 2 months. The panic in my mother's voice when she called to tell me was real. They were draining their savings, again, to cover her rent, her bills, her groceries. She's really struggling this time, Caleb, my mom said. But she'll get through it. She always does. I didn't say anything. I just listened as she explained how tight things were for them now, how worried my father was, how they were doing everything they could. The subtext was clear. I'd be fine. I always was. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 9 in the morning. My father. His voice was different. Careful. Almost formal. Caleb, we need to talk to you about something. I already knew what was coming. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places. My parents sat across from me, hands wrapped around cups they weren't drinking from. My dad cleared his throat. We're in a difficult position financially. We've been helping your sister, and things are tighter than we expected. We were hoping you could help temporarily. Just until we get back on our feet. My mother added quickly, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I looked at them both for a long moment. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just with clarity. No, I said quietly. I can't do that. The silence that followed was heavy. My dad frowned. What do you mean you can't? I mean I can't help financially anymore, I said. I have my own obligations. My own plans. I'm not in a position to support anyone else right now. My mother's face shifted. Confusion turned to something sharper. Caleb, we're family. Family helps each other. I nodded slowly. You're right. Family does help each other. I let that sit there between us. My father's expression darkened. This isn't like you. You've never been selfish before. I'm not being selfish, I said calmly. I'm setting a boundary. There's a difference. My mother leaned forward, her voice taking on that familiar edge. After everything we've done for you, after raising you, supporting you, being there for you. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd been keeping track. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because I knew this conversation would come eventually. Let me ask you something, I said. When was the last time you helped me? Financially, I mean. Actually helped me. They looked at each other, uncertain. We've always been there for you, my dad said. Have you? I asked. Because I asked for help with my medical bill 2 months ago, and you told me you couldn't because you'd already committed to my sister's apartment deposit. I asked for help with textbooks in college, and you told me I'd figure it out. I asked for help moving, and you were busy helping my sister. So when, exactly, have you been there for me? The silence that followed was different. Uncomfortable. Exposed. My mother's voice wavered. You never needed us like she did. You were always so capable. So independent. I was independent because I had to be, I said. Not because I wanted to be. There's a difference. My father shook his head. This is ridiculous. You're punishing us because we helped your sister. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm just done pretending that being ignored is the same as being loved. I stood up, leaving money on the table for my coffee. I hope things work out for you. I really do. But I can't be the person you only remember when you need something. I walked out before they could respond. My hands were steady. My chest felt clear. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. The fallout came quickly. My sister called that night, angry and confused. What is wrong with you? Mom and Dad are upset. They said you refused to help them. That's right, I said. Why? They're family, Caleb. You don't just abandon family. I almost laughed. I didn't abandon anyone. I just stopped being the only one expected to show up. She tried arguing, tried guilt, tried everything she'd watched our parents use on me for years. When none of it worked, she hung up. Then the extended family got involved. Cousins texted. Aunts called. Uncles left voicemails. The story had been twisted, of course. I was the cold son who refused to help his struggling parents. I was selfish, ungrateful, heartless. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just stayed silent. Because the truth didn't need my voice to exist. It would surface on its own. And it did. A few weeks later, my cousin accidentally let something slip during a family gathering. She mentioned how much I'd quietly helped over the years. Small things I'd never announced. Payments I'd made anonymously. Times I'd covered expenses without asking for credit. The room went quiet. Questions started. The narrative began to crack. My parents tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. People started asking why I'd pulled away. Why I'd gone silent. And slowly, the real story emerged. Not the one my parents had told. The one I'd lived. Months passed. My business grew. I traveled for work, took on bigger clients, built something stable and real. I moved to a better apartment. Started dating someone who actually saw me. Made friends who showed up without needing to be reminded. My life became mine. Fully, completely mine. Then the call came. My father's voice was different. Smaller. Scared. There'd been an accident. My mother was in the hospital. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious. He needed help. Not money. Something harder. Presence. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to let them feel what I'd felt for years. But that wasn't who I was. So I went. I showed up at the hospital. I sat with my father in the waiting room while my mother was in surgery. I stayed through the night. I helped with logistics, paperwork, insurance. I was there. But this time, it was different. When my father tried to thank me, I stopped him. "I'm here because it's the right thing to do," I said. "Not because you've earned it. And going forward, if you want me in your life, things have to change." He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done being the invisible son. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done showing up for people who only remember me when they need something. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be equal. No more favoritism. No more excuses. No more expecting me to carry weight I'm not responsible for." My father was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Okay." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a guarantee. But it was a start. My mother recovered. Slowly. And during that recovery, something shifted. Not overnight. Not easily. But gradually. My parents started asking me how I was. Not as a formality. Actually asking. They started noticing things. My work. My life. My boundaries. They didn't like all of it. But they respected it. Because they finally understood. I wasn't coming back. Not to the old version. Not to the son who made himself small so they could stay comfortable. My sister struggled with the change longer. She called once, months later, asking why I'd become so distant. I told her the truth. I stopped asking for things I knew I wouldn't receive. And once I stopped asking, I realized I didn't need them anymore. She didn't understand. Maybe she never would. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Today, when people ask me about my family, I don't hesitate. I talk about the life I built. The people who chose me. The boundaries that saved me. My parents didn't lose a son that day in the kitchen. They lost control. And I finally gained myself. I stopped asking. And in that silence, I found something I'd been searching for my whole life. Peace. If you've ever been told you're too independent to need help, know this. You're not too strong to deserve support. You're not too capable to need love. You're just surrounded by people who benefit from your silence. And you don't owe them that silence anymore. If this story felt familiar, share it in the comments. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.